The plant is only as healthy and as nutritious as the soil. And if you don't have the ability to have really great soil because you're not doing those things, you're not going to get very great food. Then there's other nutrients in which your body cannot make, and it needs it from the foods that you consume. So when those go down, now you got big problems. Most diseases and illnesses that aren't genetic is the fact that you are deficient in certain nutrients or a combination of nutrients that then causes these vulnerabilities. And we've seen that. It doesn't take much for you to get really healthy. It takes consistency, but it doesn't take much. Consistency beats out intensity every time.
One concern that I've had, and I've actually brought this up several times, is that our food quality feels like to me, and I don't have any evidence, it's just anecdotal, that it feels like it's getting worse. Like when I go out to eat or something, it kind of feels like things are smaller and things are less bursting. It doesn't feel like it's as healthy. Like the piece of meat doesn't feel as healthy. I don't know if that's a scientific thing, you know?
Sure.
Or the broccoli doesn't look quite as healthy. And it feels like with inflation and people trying to keep costs down, it feels like we're seeing a lot of corners being cut and stuff's getting smaller in package size, which I would imagine it's also probably not as nutritious. I'm having concerns that they're cutting corners, in other words.
Yeah.
And so I wanted to get your take on that as somebody who studies this and what we can do about that.
Yes. Here's the thing about food is that most people will not compromise on cost, on flavor / taste, on appearance. So when all of a sudden you've got something like inflation happening, okay, right? And the cost of perishables especially, which are the fruits and the vegetables and the things that you've got to grow, become more expensive. Most people won't want to pay more. I've got to reduce those things in a food or on a plate, let's say if I'm in a restaurant, or I've got to get more out of what I'm planting. And that's what you're talking about with the fact that foods just don't quite taste the same as they did before. Well, they don't taste the same before is because I now need that same seed to produce a plant or a fruit or a vegetable with 20% more fruit or more meat or more body because I don't have enough money to be able to, plant more seeds, if you will. Okay, right? So this is where the conversation of genetically modified foods comes in. What are they modifying? They're not modifying the amount of vitamin A in there. They're not modifying the amount of vitamin C, the phytochemicals in there. No, they're modifying the fact that I'm going to get more food out of this one seed. Even if I have to reduce the amount of vitamin C that's in this orange, at least I got a bigger orange. Because you want to see a bigger orange for the same price.
Right.
Okay? So therefore, there's no question that the food now that is grown does not have the same nutrient value as it did before. There's a problem with, crop rotation. Farmers, talk to farmers. Like, it's not easy to grow many different foods on the same piece of land because they don't get paid. It's not efficient for them to just, grow corn and then they'll grow squash and then they can't do that. They got to just grow corn. Just keep growing corn, keep growing corn, keep growing corn, get very efficient at growing that corn, blah, blah, blah. But the problem is now that soil that used to be rich in all of the nutrients because you were rotating crops and those crops were distributing those leaves and stuff in that soil, and now you had this variety and the diversity and all that sort of stuff is gone. And remember, at the very end of the day, the plant is only as healthy and as nutritious as the soil is.
Right.
And if you don't have the ability to have really great soil because you're not doing those things, you're not going to get very great food.
Right. And you sent me this. So we were talking about this and you said there's actual studies on this. And this was from 1950 to 1999. And this comes over from National Library of Medicine, NIH, says the abstract. So the objective of this study to evaluate possible changes in nutrient content for 43 garden crops between 1950 and 1999. Imagine what's happened even since then.
Yeah.
Right?
And there was a newer study too that came out that basically reinforced this,
Yeah, and it feels like things are escalating, not going the other direction.
Yeah.
We're inflating more, we're lowering the quality. Here's the results. As a group, the 43 foods show apparent statistically reliable declines for 6 nutrients. We got protein, what's CA? Calcium?
Yeah, calcium, phosphorus, iron, riboflavin, vitamin C. The really things that are very valuable for you to get from your diet. This is what was so interesting about this study, is that sure, they found all of these deficiencies that had declined or whatever, okay, right? But they were main ones. They were like key nutrients that are difficult to get from other places. And most importantly is that if you are deficient in those nutrients, that they had a greater vulnerability or cause for certain diseases and illness. Yeah. So it's almost like, okay, well, some nutrients, if they decline, not a big deal. You can get them from other places. And by the way, the body has the ability to synergize those or to make those based on other things that you are getting. But then there's other nutrients in which your body cannot make, and it needs it from the foods that you consume. So when those go down, now you got big problems. Because I believe that most diseases and illnesses that aren't genetic is the fact that you are deficient in certain nutrients or a combination of nutrients that then causes these vulnerabilities. And we've seen that. Like, okay, like don't get enough vitamin C, you get scurvy. If you don't get enough vitamin D, you get rickets. Like it's not like this isn't new, you know, you have vitamin A, pellagra. Like, I mean, it's known if you are deficient in this vitamin or this mineral, it will then compound itself into this disease or illness. You know, calcium, osteoporosis, you know, type of thing. You know?
So what do you do about that? I don't study my food. I don't source my food. I don't look at the label, who grew this and what California. It's a very overwhelming thing to even, you know, feed myself in general. You know, it's like a process to eat healthy and like cook stuff and meal prep and, you know, do everything healthy. So then when you go to source the food, it turns into this big process. And so what can people do? You know, is it organic food is better, or farmers markets are better, or any general strategies for people who are, you know, busy in my position or in your position? You know, how do you navigate all that?
Yeah, I think the number one, please, you know, even though we're like kind of talking about this, I don't want people to get freaked out like, oh my gosh, you know, no matter what I eat or how much I eat, like I'm not going to get the nutrition. It doesn't take a lot. So please know this, guys. It's just like in health, okay, right? Like literally, whether it's weight loss or cardiovascular issues or diabetes or obesity, honestly, I'm telling you, I've experienced it. It doesn't take much for you to get really healthy. It takes consistency, but it doesn't take much. Consistency beats out intensity every time. And the reason for that is what you were saying earlier. Nutrition is compounding. It builds on top of each other. So if you just do a little bit each day, trust me, there's going to be this awesome watershed moment where you're going to be foundationally strong and you'll have the ability to optimize anything. Okay, so number one is that, just don't freak out about this. Here's the number one thing you can do, is that I think that one of the biggest things that people do that cause nutrient deficiencies in the foods that they're buying is probably cooking method. Okay? So you can leach a lot of nutrients from when you start cooking. And think about this, guys. Just think about heat. The higher the heat, the longer time that it is in that heat, the more nutrient breakdown that you're gonna have. I am not telling you guys to eat raw all the time, but I'm telling you, you can really gain a lot of nutrient value by simply just, you know, making sure that they are cooked just until they're like just soft, and then get it out of that heat. You'll be able to retain a lot of nutrient value kind of.
So like in your vegetables?
In your vegetables.
Okay.
Secondly is that diversity of your nutrition can be incredibly valuable. So like what I do is I go to the grocery store and I'm like, I'm gonna pick one vegetable of every color. I'm gonna pick an orange one, so I'll bring a carrot. I'm gonna bring a yellow one, that's my squash. I'll bring a green one, which is my asparagus. I'll bring a red one, which is my bell pepper. I'll bring a white one, which is my onion. And I'll just like kind of have this little rainbow of kind of, you know, vegetables. I also kind of do that a little bit with my fruits as well too. And I've just got a rainbow. Because here's what I do know is that the color is representative of different types of phytochemicals, phytonutrients. And so when I kind of eat this rainbow of things, not necessarily every day, but maybe I consume all of these within the week. And you got to think about your health that way. It's not necessarily what you do every day. It's what you do in that week or that month. Can you get all of it together in that month? Can you get all of it together in that week? And if you can, fantastic. You don't need to be perfect at every meal, at every day, or even every week. Sometimes there's certain things that I'm just like, I just want to make sure that I get all this stuff done in 30 days. That's my, you know what I mean? Right? So I think diversity is fantastic. And then, you know, this is where the role of kind of supplementation happens as well too. Is that supplementation really what it is, guys, is it's just super concentrated nutrients that are typically found in food. Like there's certain nutrients that we're kind of like making, okay, right? But most of the nutrients that we talk about, like whether it's the ones that are in your multivitamin or whether it's the vitamin D or the omega essential fatty acids or the quercetin and things like that. They're just basically, they are the same exact nutrients. And let me just say that to you guys, okay, right? Like a lot of people are always like, no, that's not the same vitamin A that's found in that carrot. This is a different one. No. It is the same. Whether I make that vitamin A in a lab or whether I make that vitamin A and I extract it from that orange, which you usually don't do, you actually do it through an asparagus, is that it's the same molecule. Now, but the great thing about getting it from the carrot and getting it from the asparagus is that you're also getting all of these other wonderful nutrients within that carrot and that asparagus that can work synergistically with that vitamin A, and you get this one great benefit. But as far as just the vitamin A, it's all the same. And so, like, I have a mentor who says he really believes in, supplementation and his kind of formulation for supplementation, and he's just not a big believer in how we are growing food, processing food, preserving food, cooking food, things like that. And so he's like, listen, I literally think of food as my supplementation. Lack of nutrients that are found in the food, he's like, really, I'm supplementing my supplements with the food. There's something to be said about that.
Yeah. What is the process that somebody would go through if they wanted to, first of all, do they need to go through a process? Like, are you nutritionally deficient if you feel a certain way, or is there a test you can take? Can you go get a blood test or something? I'm trying to understand, like, how would somebody measure and gauge whether they are on track or off track in this space? And then if they get back on track, they'll see noticeable benefits, right? They'll feel better from this?
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so watch this, guys, right? This is where, like, you've probably seen maybe these micronutrient deficiency tests, right?
Yeah, I see ads and stuff, and go get a blood result, or go do this, and you are deficient or something, and then you start telling yourself you're deficient, but maybe you feel pretty good, and you start to wonder, do I need this? And I get concerned about being overly additive, adding too many things to ourselves. There's a concept in a book called Anti-Fragile called via negativa, that oftentimes, like, we're adding too much stuff to our bodies, and we can be healthy by removing some of the stressors, removing some of the things that might actually be interfering with our natural healing, our natural pathways. And so, I've known people who are like hypochondriacs, right?
Yes.
They have to take everything they see. They're constantly biohacking this and biohacking that, and trying to turn all the knobs on their body because they're trying to fill something or solve some problem that may not exist. And so what I guess my question is how do you gauge that? How do you measure that? Is it good to do a baseline every year? Do you go get blood results in your yearly checkup? Would your doctor tell you something's wrong? Or what kind of level of investigation should people do into this?
Okay, so number one, I love what you said about, is it better to remove obstacles or to fortify? I am a big believer in I would much rather remove obstacles than start, fortify. Okay, right? Because the body has the most amazing resilience, strength, power. I mean, think about it, guys. Like, you right now are the strongest species that has been designed over hundreds of thousands of years. Like, you are the best of the best right now, okay? So, and you have been able to be, your body has gone through famine, it has gone through disease, it has gone through it's gone through a lot, environmental change, you have built
boats, all over everything.
You are the best, okay, right?
We're here.
So you've got this power, and you're right, most of the issues that people have is because they're overburdening their body, and it has less to do with the fact that they've got a lot of deficiencies. Their deficiencies are only coming to play because they're overburdening their body, and you're going to get the most bang for your buck by removing some of those burdens. That's why we're talking about stress. You got the most bang from your buck by removing some of that stress rather than adding a bunch of nutrition to deal with this stress. So that's the first thing I want to say. The second thing is that you got to be careful with these micronutrient deficiency tests, and I've taken a bunch of them, okay, right? Is that they're on the surface, what you think they're doing is they're telling you, oh, you are really low in vitamin A, and so therefore you need more vitamin A. But when you see how those tests are actually done,
and then they sell you the vitamin A. They sell you the vitamin A packs and all the things, and you get all this big subscription program, and all those things. And my concern is, do you need all that?
No, you don't. You don't need all that, and that's not actually what it's saying. And this is the thing, guys, is it's not saying that. Is that what you're having a response? Okay, you think what it's doing is it's pulling your blood and then it's running it under a spectrometer or whatever, and it's looking at how much vitamin A molecule that you have in that liter of blood blood and how much B12 that it's looking, it's not doing that actually. What it's actually looking at is more of like an inflammatory type of response that you have to these certain vitamins and minerals or whatever. And then it's designating that, okay, listen, you know, you've got this type of inflammatory response to vitamin E, A, B12, B6, B3. And so therefore, if it's high in B12, you don't need to be taking any more B12 because it seems like you've got a higher inflammatory response to B12 than vitamin A. So what I'm trying to tell you guys is it's not telling you what you think it's telling you, okay, right? And even I didn't know this until I took one, and we work with a really well-known naturopathic oncologist. His name's Dr. Dan Rubin. Like, he's the founder of the American Association of Naturopathic Oncology. And I was talking to him about this blood test, and I was like, oh my gosh, Dr. Rubin, like, I'm low in this, I'm low in. He's like, no, dude, it's not what you're low in. It's just testing an inflammatory response.
Yeah.
It's not looking at that. But you don't know that. So therefore, it's easier for me to sell, because at the very end of the day, I want to sell my vitamin A. I want to sell my vitamin D.
Right.
And so what is the most powerful way to sell it to you? The most powerful way to sell it to you is that, hey, I just tested you and you don't have enough vitamin D.
Right.
So you need more vitamin D. Now, there are tests that can show that you are low in something like vitamin D, but do remember, there's not very many of those tests. That's why when you go take those blood tests, they only have like a few of those nutrients. It isn't the whole panel like the micronutrient deficiency test.
Yeah.
So therefore, that's one. But this is the second thing, and this is the most important thing, is that, see, you got to remember, guys, is that when you're testing my blood, that isn't testing my blood over 30 days. That's testing my blood at the time that you tested my blood. Mm-hmm. So that's based on what I ate that day. Mm-hmm. That's based on the stresses that I placed on myself that day. That's based on, you know, the different types of hormonal things that were going on that day. Because remember, it eats up those nutrients to be able to manufacture whatever you're doing. So you might be deficient, or you might be showing something on that day that isn't representative of what's actually happening to you over 30 days. And then you also have to remember this, guys, is that vitamins and minerals, they work like synergistically together. So let me give you an example. Let's say that I'm showing that I've got this level of calcium in my body, in my blood. So the thing is that calcium should be in my bone. So if calcium is supposed to be in my bone and not in my blood, that's regulated by actually vitamin D and vitamin K. Is it that I am deficient in, or I have too much calcium, or is it that I don't have enough vitamin K that actually shuttles the calcium into the bone? And because I'm deficient in K, I don't have enough of that shuttling, so that calcium is now sitting in my bloodstream. Like, you don't know that, right? It's kind of like saying, well, magnesium and calcium, they also work together. Am I actually deficient in the calcium, or is it this that I have too much of the magnesium? You've got to be very careful in doing that, because these nutrients, they work together. They're all complementing each other, okay, right? Vitamin C, vitamin A, and vitamin E, they regenerate each other. So if all of a sudden I've got high amounts of vitamin C, maybe it's just that I've got high amounts of vitamin E that's regenerating the inert vitamin C after it gets oxidized. Like, that's what actually happens. In saying all this complicated stuff, don't worry. How do you feel?
Yeah.
How do you feel? And that's the thing about sleep, by the way, too, guys, is if you wake up like fresh and refreshed and ready to go, and you're going through your day and you're sleeping 5 hours a day, like, feel good about sleeping 5 hours a day. If you are like, you know, sleeping 8 hours a day and you're waking up and you're groggy and tired and you're maybe 8 hours isn't what you should be sleeping with.
Yeah.
You have to listen to your body. You have to like really be aware of your body. But what you've got to do though, too, is you have to make sure that you're doing a lot of really good things. Like, Rob, for you to say, listen, I am going to listen to my body is probably a good practice, because you're doing a lot of really wonderful things for yourself. Mm-hmm. If you were doing a lot of crappy things to yourself and you were like, I'm just listening to my body.
Yeah, which I used to do.
Right?
Yeah,
I'd say, you know what? Probably your body doesn't talk really.
Know what it wants. Yeah.
But it doesn't know what it wants. You know what I mean?
Definitely,
right?
yeah.
So therefore, I don't want people to get freaked out about their nutrition. Like I said, at the very end of the day, it doesn't take much for you to be healthy. I think the main things, it's like my mentor would always say, some people worry about mice in the attic when there's elephants on the roof.
Yeah.
And what I mean by that is that they're like, oh, Jeevers, like, I'm only going to eat organic. I only eat organic. Okay, great. Hey, why don't you just eat more vegetables? Because you're not eating enough vegetables. So why don't you focus on just eating more whole foods and eating more vegetables, and like not eating so many calories, and like making sure that you're, you know, like, worry about about that first, and then we can talk about whether you should focus on being, gluten-free or being organic or intermittent fasting and all this sort of stuff that these, marketing companies are feeding you to say, hey, here's a simple solution.
Right.
Like, hey, you want to lose weight? Hey, just eat in a 6-hour window. Okay, you know what? There's studies that show that you can eat in a 6-hour window and still gain a lot of weight. Because at the very end of the day, if you ate 3,000 calories in a 6-hour window and your body only needed 2,500, you would gain weight.
Right.
Because where's the other 500 going? It didn't give a care that you just, ate it in 6 hours.
Right. Yeah. And so don't feel like you need to put yourself into somebody else's template.
Yes.
Like, don't have to fit yourself into a mold. Listen to your body. And it sounds like a lot of the basics are also, very important.